Alright, you guys have asked us to make another build from Castlevania for quite some time now. And if you played the video game back from the 80s, you know the most iconic weapon is the whip. And in the video game, you can upgrade that whip along the way, eventually turning it into the Morning Star. Now, in the most recent Netflix series, Castlevania, Trevor actually finds the Morning Star as is, and that's the weapon we're going to build today. This Morning Star has a lot of repetitive parts on both the handle and the striking head. Now, the easy way to make a bunch of different parts over and over is to draw them out on a piece of sheet and cut them with either a torch or a plasma torch.
But this is a blacksmith shop!
But this is a blacksmith shop, and the true sign of a talented blacksmith is not being able to make an item one time, but to be able to make it the same multiple times over and over. So we're going to move right to the forge and start forging those flanges.
The head of the Morning Star has 4 separate flanges, so I pick out a piece of 3/4 inch stock and begin forging each flange. I do not cut my piece of stock into 4 pieces and then forge the flanges individually, but rather utilize the length for a more comfortable grip. I move to the anvil and isolate my material, keeping it a little bit thick in the middle. This weapon also being quite absurd with the amount of chain that it has and the way it's shown to be used in the series and in the game, is based roughly on a historical Morning Star or a flail. flails originated in medieval Europe by, surprisingly enough, peasants who would use the equipment necessary to beat the grain off of straw to take down knights who would levy too heavy of attacks. So eventually the knightly class and the soldier class adopted the flail design and made it better, made it more weapon-like and more efficient at penetrating armor.
From this point on, the forging is much less blacksmithing and much more bladesmithing-like, as Ilya forges in the bevels for our striking points on our flanges.
Well, now that the flanges are forged, I'm going to move to the sander, do a little bit of cleanup on them, and get them ready to be put together.
With the basic shape and geometry already forged into these flanges, my job isn't so much to sculpt them as much as it is to crisp up the lines that are already there. Not only that, I have to make sure all four flanges match each other, so when we weld them together, our symmetry is spot on. all 4 flanges now sanded to shape, it's now time to make the little loop where the chain will attach to our head and start welding all 4 flanges of our striking head together.
The handle of the Morning Star looks very much like a traditional mace and has 6 identical flanges. So I take a piece of flat bar, 2 inches by 1/4 inch, and size it down a little bit. I keep cutting off identical pieces and setting them aside in order to later on make the flanges themselves. Most of the preforming on those flanges is done under the power hammer, and once the preforms are fairly identical, I move in and clean up some of the shape on the anvil itself by hand.
doing something here that, well, I rarely do. I drew myself a template on some cardboard to make sure that all 6 flanges are exactly the same. I usually just eyeball things, but being 6 of them, that's a little tough, so I'm going to take my time, make sure everything's right, use just about every different size contact wheel in the shop, and make these flanges ready to assemble.
Alright, so I have all 6 flanges profiled at this point. From here I have to get in and make a little back angle cut in right here on this piece. To do that, I took our slack belt attachment on our sander and cut down a 2-inch wide belt to about 1.25 inches. That's going to allow me to get in here and make all the angles that I need nice and sharp.
The handle of the Morning Star also looks very much like a scepter. So I'm going to take a piece of 1/2 inch round and bend it around into a hook shape. Then I'm going to bevel the sides of that hook and punch some holes, making it a really nice shape.
Not only is this going to be the loop where our chain attaches to our handle, but we're also going to use the rod that extends from this loop to weld all of our flanges together and be the base of the handle itself. After welding, we ground small notches at the end of the flanges, but left them tapered. That way the whole flange and rod assembly will act as a wedge as we drive it into our pipe handle. To create the pommel, or end cap, for our handle piece, Chris is welding on a very large nut onto the end of the pipe. This will give me enough mass to grind the desired shape after it's welded solid. There's lots of different ways we could create the cross that goes on the end of the scepter-like handle. This time, I'm just going to create that shape right on the sander. With all the pieces of the handle now welded together, the very last thing to do is to attach our Morningstar head to the handle. We've wanted to do a flail or a Morningstar for quite some time. I don't think any of us ever thought that we would choose one that had 12 feet of chain between the handle and the striking point. But when we decided to make another build from Castlevania, the choice was abundantly clear. We were going to have to make Trever Belmont's Morningstar.
Well, that was a blast. Not only does this thing look cool, but it also performs pretty well. Wish the chain was a little less long, but nonetheless, I think Trever Belmont would be very happy with this in his hands. Be sure to subscribe to That Works if you want to see more builds like this, and tell us in the comments below which builds you'd like to see this team build next. Thank you.